This podcast may contain disturbing content for some listeners. It's intended for mature audiences. Listener discretion is advised. This is True Crime XS.
I follow a lot of true crime groups on Facebook, and I do a lot of different services where I get notifications on things, and I get press releases and breaking news updates. And I've noticed, like, a lot of times, right around the anniversary of something, sort of by design, it'll be the time to like raise awareness of a thing. And recently, there was a case that I saw on Reddit's Unresolved Mysteries subreddit. I mean, you can go there with just reddit.com/r/unresolved mysteries. And I'm going to put this episode out right away because this is an episode we used to call these like unrelated or like off topics. It sort of dovetails in with what we're doing with The Void as far as the location goes. But I guess it's
more news oriented. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like news.
It's like an update. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Because we're going to talk about a case that we covered back in season 1. She's been mentioned since then, but you can go on the Unresolved subreddit, and there was a very good write-up by, I think the user's name was Alien Abduction Fan, and they had done a pretty good write-up right around the anniversary of this case. The anniversary was sort of right before Memorial Day in the United States, and this would have been the 12th anniversary of the case. And so I'm just going to go ahead and give the update, and we'll go back through the case. So what happened in a case that we had covered in season 1 was a body was found. So the case would have had its 12th anniversary on the 27th into the 28th of this year. As we're recording this, it's May the 30th. Well, it turns out on the 23rd, when a totally normal everyday occurrence was happening, and some compost and topsoil was being picked up from a small farm, a human skull was discovered in this like compost pile. And the person who discovered it, they contacted local authorities, and the local authorities swore out a warrant related to it, and they immediately began searching, and they've been searching for several days. My understanding is there's still activity at this location. I'm not 100% sure that that's accurate as of when people are hearing this, because I'm releasing this episode a little early because of like the nature of it all sort of happening. So, you've got 12th anniversary, and right before that, you have a skull related to it found. And they did confirm on the anniversary, the 28th into the 29th, they came back and they talked to the family, and they let them know that this particular missing persons case is no longer a missing persons case. We don't know what it is yet, but we're going to talk about that, some of the options. This is a weird one for me because it's an Israel Keys possibility, and it's not a very realistic possibility, although some people have acted like it is more realistic than it is. I guess we had this case on there. This is a case that takes place over sort of 2 days. Weirdly, it takes place just about a week before the Courier's disappearance.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Did they disappear in June?
Yeah. They disappeared June. Like if you pull this up on a calendar, this would have happened on a Friday in May of 2011, the last Friday in May. And then the Courier's disappearance would have been in June 2011, but they went missing. Lorraine and Bill Courier, who were up in Essex, Vermont, they went missing June 8th of 2011. So they were seen by their coworkers on June 8th, and then they sort of vanish. I don't know how you want to describe it, because in my mind it takes place in the overnight hours. But they're missed on June 9th, 2011. So the Friday after this occurred would have been June the 3rd. And the following Thursday, or Wednesday into Thursday, is when the couriers go missing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, right. I wasn't sure about, sometimes June and July kind of get meshed in my head. But it looks like we don't actually have anything definitive on Keyes, except that around the 2nd he was traveling from Alaska into Chicago.
Right.
So, more than likely, he would have been.
If he booked a flight and he drove, this is how I pitched it to you a long time ago. You may not remember me talking about this nonsense. I pitched that if he drove, then there was a possibility he would have driven down through British Columbia and tried to cross into Canada above Washington. Then this puts him in the area. It's not very realistic. So I'm not saying this is what happened. I'm saying like that was my
right.
Yeah.
He has a flight from Anchorage to Chicago on June 2nd. So I think that would be pretty tight.
No. You're not following what I'm saying. I'm saying if he bought the ticket for the sake of confusion.
Oh, I think that
that's how so like if he bought the ticket but he did the drive, these were the numbers we ran. Like he didn't actually get on the plane, he just had the ticket.
I think that's actually something, and I don't know this, but I do know, especially after 9/11, not using a ticket was a big deal.
You know, I thought about that, but if you look at the FBI's setup here,
it's the financial records. I gotcha.
They're using the credit card side of it, so we don't actually like that. Could have been written off in a way that just isn't public facing. But my point is, if we take him out of Anchorage and we drive him through Canada to Washington, then it works. Otherwise, it doesn't work at all, and that sounds insane to me. But
yeah, he also there's also the car rental on June the 3rd, which
correct.
Is that he had toll receipts for that, and so that's more of a thing you kind of have to be there to get.
Right, which that brings me up to another case that I've always like. These two cases are on my top two cases. So the first Friday is the case we're going to talk about today. Now, the second Friday is another case that's in my top 5 of all time. I wish I knew what happened, and that's Lauren Spearer. So she's on the 3rd. And then the Courier's case is the following week. So I had posited if he was on a spree and there were bank robberies or arsons nearby, this could be a thing. That doesn't turn out to be very realistic. It's just something I had posited in earlier episodes.
Before we did all the research we eventually did, there are certain criteria to cases that made them seem like more viable possibilities that might lead us to some of Israel Keyes' victims. And this case fit that, right?
Yeah, there were aspects of it, yeah.
The circumstances surrounding it and, what we knew about Keyes. And ultimately, I think you remained a maybe. I pretty much was convinced he most likely wasn't involved pretty early on, but it still did have the characteristics necessary for it to be a possibility in some ways.
Yeah, and it had tied back to again the Couriers and Lauren Spearer, but the case that we're talking about today it's an odd mystery. This is the case of Maddie Scott or Madison Geraldine Scott, and the update is Maddie's body is found in 2023, 12 years after she went missing. Her body has been found. So we were going to cover her today and then talk about what we know and what we don't know, primarily because I have mentioned her in the past. And she's up there. She was one of the people. I don't know how to explain this update is huge for me. Like, it gives me chills, my hair on the back of my neck standing up. I'm so thankful she's been found. I feel awful for her family right now. I have followed all of their groups. I'm in all the local groups, from Prince George West over to like the area that she was from. It's called Vanderhoof. I'm in 3 or 4 groups locally to there. But I wanted to run through her case, and then I wanted to just sort of talk with you about that and see what you thought. The Cliff Notes of Maddie's life and case, it goes kind of like this. So Maddie Scott was born to Eldon and Dawn Scott on April 29th of 1991. She has an older brother named Ben and a younger sister named Georgia. And she is like a girl's girl, a Tom girl, everything all rolled into one. She's into dirt biking. She's into figure skating. She does horseback riding. She's into all kinds of team sports. She's a very social person. If you go on, the family has a site, and some of her friends have a site where you can go on. And I don't know exactly what they are, but it's like finding Maddie.ca or MaddieScott.ca. They have Facebook groups related to this. I'm sure those names will be changing slightly. They're totally worth a read. There's a lot of people in there, very personal. Particularly Dawn Scott. Dawn Scott is like very involved in the search for her daughter for all 12 years that she has been missing. When Maddie went missing, and don't Google Madison Scott. That's a different person. It takes you down a whole different rabbit hole. It's Maddie
I'm
Scott.
not kidding. Yeah.
Maddy, just saving you the time and the browser explosion that would happen there. So at the time she went missing, Maddie was working as an apprentice heavy-duty mechanic with her father at a company called MBG Logging. Her brother famously, on multiple occasions, has said she was someone who was just as comfortable in a dress as she was wearing coveralls that were covered in oil. That's sort of how like they describe her. She was described as being 5'4" tall and weighing about 160 pounds. From all accounts, she had a vivacious, fun, loving, playful, social personality, and she was a spontaneous person. She would drop things that didn't require like a major commitment or responsibility to do something fun. She would sometimes break off. And this is one of the things about her I found interesting is her friends were pretty honest about her. Sometimes she would break off something that seemed boring if she felt like there was something more fun going on, but she would invite people to go with. For example, she had plans with her cousin Cora Kelly, and she canceled them to go to a party at Hogsback Lake for one of her friends in May of 2011. Now, in spite of all of that, she was someone who was constantly on the phone with her family and her friends. She had an older Ford pickup truck. In fact, I had the same pickup truck at one point. Hers is white. Mine was red and white. She had a Ford truck, and it was like a 1990 Ford F-150 that she took with her to this campsite. But a lot of her stuff was very expensive. She had expensive motorbike gear that she had brought with her, including like helmets and pads. She had just gotten a new iPhone right before she went missing. And she goes out to be at this party with multiple people that she knows on a Friday night. So this is really just her going camping. There was an incident where she arrives at Hogsback Lake and she feels like she has the wrong tent and that she didn't have any tent poles. So she goes back to her house and picks up a larger tent and the poles that she needs. And she talks to her mom, and that's at 8:30 on this Friday night. She arrives back at Hogsback Lake and she sets up her tent and settles her stuff in. Now, she, for some reason, stays in the tent while people are partying in the 10 to 11 o'clock hours. She texts with her mother, but according to witnesses, she didn't really come out of the tent that much. And around 12:30, so crossing over into the next day, she gets an incoming call on her phone. And according to her mom, this is someone that she knew. Now I'm going to go to sort of the Wikipedia timeline here, just for like you and I to be able to have like a clear picture. It's not got very many entries, about 12 entries. So it notes that May 27th, 2011, at 2000 hours, she goes to Hogsback Lake with Jordy Bolduc. They gather some firewood. And according to a Facebook event page, this is Garrett's birthday party starting at Hogsback Lake. She's there with a friend named Jordy and a friend named Garrett. And according to the Facebook event page, this is Garrett's birthday party at Hogsback Lake that is starting at 2000 hours on May 27, 2011. And that's 8 o'clock, 8 o'clock in the evening. So about 8:30, she realizes that she's got the wrong size tent and no poles. She goes back home. This is where she talks to her mom. And then she's back and setting up her tent by about 9:30. And by 10 o'clock, the party's starting and then continuing. But Maddie is in her tent. She's having a text conversation with her mother. And then she gets an incoming phone call. And that takes us to around 12:30 in the morning. She's still in the tent when Jordy asks her to come with her and her boyfriend. Basically, they say, Maddie, we don't want to leave you here. Come with us. Maddie refuses, and she stays in her tent. There are still people partying, but they're starting to leave between around 1 and 2 in the morning. By 3 o'clock, other people have come to her as they're leaving in groups, and they've said, hey, we don't want to leave you here. Come with us. That's what gives us the first big piece of our timeline. And that is that at 3 o'clock in the morning on May 28th, 2011, Maddie Scott is not seen again. So by about 8:30 on May 28th, 2011 in the morning, the window there of 5 hours or so is established because people start to come back to the area that she was last known to be. But that's where she disappears, in that 5-hour period.
Right. And sort of based on, that last phone call she received, there's some, talk that she had found out that the guy she might like, he was happy to be friends with her.
You think she got friend zoned?
Yeah, friend zoned. And so that could be why she was in her tent as opposed to partying with everybody. And, as I followed this case throughout the years, I always imagined that she, when she went into her tent, the party was going on, right? She realized her friend was leaving. And then I had a feeling that she went to sleep. And I have a feeling that she had no idea that she ended up there alone.
Yeah, that was kind of how I pictured it too.
Right. And then I wondered, how alone was she?
Yeah, and so it's this 5-hour window here, which it ties into some other interesting stuff we'll talk about in just a minute. She's not alone that long though, because Jordy comes back. She's going to get her sleeping bag and her clothes, and she says that she sees Maddie's tent as unzipped, and Maddie's sleeping bag is off to the side, but she doesn't see Maddie at 8:30 in the morning. The person who had been hosting the party, he reported that he saw Maddie's tent when he went to clean up after the party. According to him, this is around 10:30 in the morning. And when he went to look at everything, he saw that the tent was zipped up, but he didn't check it out because he thought that meant that she was in there sleeping. That could be that Jordy zipped the tent back up after she took her stuff to kind of provide an extra layer of protection to Maddie's stuff, although a tent is not much. It really only protects you from the weather. It doesn't really protect you from theft or anything. I
was under the impression Jordy probably thought, I don't think she thought at that point in time anything was wrong.
I don't think anybody did.
And she had done something that wasn't very nice. If not at the time, definitely in retrospect, right?
You mean leaving with her boyfriend?
Well, yeah, leaving her friend there alone.
Yeah.
And so that might have been just the reason I'm saying this is because there's been some heat put on that situation, and I don't think Jordy did anything to her friend. And I think she might have just been avoiding confrontation by not exploring further.
Yeah.
The other thing about Jordy going in the tent and retrieving her stuff that morning was she noticed Maddie's rings scattered about. And according to what I've heard, it's been through various sources over time. One of the circumstances that, it's not factually verified, but it's also not denied or like shown to be not true. And it's always been weird to me. So she had, several rings that she wore all the time and that they were like sentimental. And so she wouldn't have just, tossed them about. But it would be possible. I wish I knew exactly like what the account of it was, right?
Yeah.
But I don't. I just know that like Jordy noticed the rings and thought it was odd that they were sort of scattered about. And I can't remember if they were scattered about in the tent or in the grass.
I thought it was in the grass next to the tent.
That is really the only clue of any sort of disarray, I guess.
Yeah.
Her sleeping bag was pushed to the side, but that didn't necessarily seem out of the ordinary, I guess.
Right.
But the rings being out, and I wish somebody would say whether Maddie slept in her rings. Because if she had taken them off and they scattered as she was getting pulled out of the tent or whatever, that's something. But it would be really strange, like for multiple rings to be coming off at the same time, unless they were just loose fit, I guess. But also, like, I have to say that my number one go-to in the event something were to happen to me, my breadcrumbs would consist of my jewelry for sure, right? Like I'd be leaving them.
Yeah. Well, my wife wears multiple rings. She has 5 rings that she wears. Not so like on one hand, she only wears rings on one finger, but there's 3 rings stacked. And on the other hand, she has 2 rings. When she's wearing those rings, if we're out somewhere, she takes them off and stacks them like usually like by her pillow or like on a bedside table. But if we were camping, it'd be real easy for her to put those on a shirt. And when she picked the shirt up to put it on, for those rings to go flying. I've seen that happen on multiple occasions. I'm not saying that's what happened here, but I'm saying that's what I picture is like something where you get up to like respond to something causing the rings to scatter either inside or outside of the tent. I think it's possible.
Right. And so I've never seen that really like factually analyzed or anything like that.
Well, yeah.
But it really is sort of the only kind of, and I say disarray, like, there's no blood. It doesn't look like there was a struggle necessarily. Not to mention the fact the friend who was more than likely, embarrassed she had left her friend alone there was avoiding the confrontation that I don't know if it would have occurred or not. But, she grabbed her stuff out of there, right?
Yeah.
Because she had left. And so she came back to get her stuff and, she didn't think anything of it. And so who knows, how much of a mess, if there really was more disarray. But the rings being out, that's really the only kind of weird thing that presents itself for us to kind of pick at, right?
Yeah. And unfortunately, because of what happens the next night, so this is Saturday night, there's a large party in the same spot with between 150 and 200 people.
And it's the same group, right?
It's the same group with all their additional friends. So it causes 2 things to happen. The first thing is any evidence that was there has now been compounded and trampled. You're not going to find anything of evidentiary value related to this case. The second thing is because there's so many people around, nobody really notices that Maddie has gone missing. She's not reported missing until shortly after noon on Sunday because her parents are like trying to balance like, this young girl who's 20 years old. They're trying to balance her independence with like safety. So she had just turned 20, less than a month before this happens. So they decided we haven't heard from her in 2 days. There's no text messages, no calls. Let's go check on her. So they go to the campsite and they find her truck is still there. It's locked, but it's one of the only things there. And they find her tent, but now it's collapsed. They asked a few friends who were camping nearby whether they had seen Maddie or not, and no one had seen Maddie at this point, and they couldn't remember the last time they had seen her. So people are like recalling, and they're recalling things that are like Friday night into Saturday morning. So Dawn, Maddie's mom, she calls the RCMP and basically reports the disappearance and gets it started. Now the collapsed tent, Maddie's tent was found collapsed at the site, but that happened during the second party on Saturday night, and the person who was involved with that was identified and questioned by the RCMP, and nothing was ever reported to the public in regards to that being something suspicious that had happened. Weirdly, Maddie Scott's little sister was at the second party, but she didn't see Maddie there, and she didn't want to report that she was at the party because she was underage and she didn't want to get in any trouble.
Right, and so it kind of, and I think because the second party was so big, it was really hard for anybody to, say with any sort of definition whether she was there or not, right? But the conclusion later was she wasn't at the second party.
Yeah. We've been talking about the Highway of Tears. I'm just going to point this out now that the Highway of Tears is very close to this area. It's north of this area. I'm not saying it's related at all. I'm just tying that in as we move into like all the things about this.
It's interesting because the 48 hours that aired back in like 2000, I imagine 12, I guess it could have been 11. It actually posited like, is Maddie Scott the latest victim
of someone
of the Highway of Tears, right? And that always stuck out to me because I don't see that at all. But it's literally what, like, I think the name of the episode is.
Well, we were talking about this from that perspective, and I just want to point this out because this is something that's very different from the other Highway of Tears victims, in my opinion.
It is very different, yes.
So the 27th is when she goes missing. The 28th is the second party, and people are wondering. The 29th is when her parents come looking for her. And all of those things are also different from the Highway of Tears.
Completely, yes.
And so I went back through my massive newspaper clippings, because this is weirdly one of the only cases I've ever kept newspaper clippings of. But I have tons of them. And the newspaper clipping I have here is barely readable. So I went on to find this. And this is from The Province. It is a Jennifer Saltman story. It is from the Morning Edition, May 31st, 2011. It's on newspapers.com if you want to pull it up. My point is, can't be a Highway of Tears case because literally Sunday she's reported missing. Monday everybody's looking. Tuesday it's in the local paper. And this is what it says. Police and family are searching for missing woman. RCMP and search and rescue teams are looking for a young woman who disappeared from a party at Hogsback Lake near Vanderhoof. Madison Scott, 20, left Vanderhoof on Friday to camp and party at the lake. She was last seen around 3 a.m. on Saturday, and her family called RCMP Sunday afternoon because they had not heard from her. Scott has also not contacted her friends. Her tent and truck were found, but searchers, which include members of the RCMP and search and rescue teams from Vanderhoof, Prince George, Burns Lake, and Fort St. James, have not yet found Scott. The search continued Monday, and a swiftwater rescue team had been called in. Scott is described as Caucasian, 5'4", 170 pounds with ginger hair. She was last seen wearing a black T-shirt and blue jean capris. According to an RCMP news release Monday, Scott's lack of communications is out of character and has those that love her very concerned. Family members reached by phone Monday said much of the family was out searching for Scott. Todd Scott, who went to Nechako Valley Secondary School with Madison, although they were not related, described her as outgoing, outdoorsy, and really, really nice. It's pretty shocking, he said. I'm definitely keeping my eyes and my ears open for her. A former Vanderhoof resident who knows the family said, it's a closed town. The whole town is just totally affected by it. People are scared. The woman who did not want to be named said Hogsback Lake is a popular place for parties and weekend camping. Anyone who may have seen Scott or knows where she is should call 250-567-2222. So very different from the Highway of Tears case right there, because that is literally 48 hours from the time that she's reported missing that she's in the local paper. And it's not just that paper. Maddie Scott goes on to become essentially national news. And she stays that way. Like the whole time. Her case never really dies off at all. Here's another interesting part about Maddie's case when we're tying it to the Highway of Tears. And I remember seeing that episode. I didn't see it in real time. I saw it much later, either on streaming or like reruns. The investigation following the Maddie Scott disappearance has used more investigative tools and resources than any other case in British Columbia history. Police stated that they had interviewed every single person who was at the party the night of the 27th, and they believed they had interviewed everyone from the night of the 28th. They had no reason to believe that anyone at the party was responsible for her disappearance. They also reported that anyone of interest at all that they wanted to had been cooperative by taking polygraph tests. Most of the people at this huge party on Saturday night also take polygraph tests. Jordy reported that she took numerous polygraph tests, and that at least one of those times that they had said she aced it. Polygraph tests are not super admissible, but I'm going to go ahead and go out on a limb and say that people who are 17 to 22 years old who aren't sociopaths, it's pretty easy to tell, not by the test, well, necessarily, but by the examiner's circumstances around that. If you've got trained RCMP sitting down with them, I think they would know if one of these kids had had something to do with Maddie's disappearance. I definitely know they would know if two of these kids had something to do with Maddie's disappearance.
If two of them did, one of them would have talked already.
Exactly. And you know, the result of
It'd be
polygraph,
the one with the least involvement, right?
the least culpability is the talker, yes, most of the time. Or sometimes you get the person
Who's
talking,
the mastermind, but they're making it seem like they're the least culpable.
Yeah, they engage in minimization, right? Even though these aren't admissible, like the interviews that happen around these polygraphs, because the way a polygraph, I don't know. Have you ever had a polygraph?
No, I haven't.
Okay, so we've talked about it a little bit on the show. What would happen here is there'd be a pre-polygraph interview. So that's like setting the story in stone and seeing like what parts of it are going to be flexible. The investigator would ask them questions ahead of time. And then the examiner would ask them the same or similar questions in whatever style he does his examination. And then the investigator and the examiner would have a chance to confront any discrepancies. So all of the information gathered here is admissible in court, even if the examination results aren't necessarily admissible in court. And that's valuable investigative and intelligence tools.
Right. And I have never had a polygraph. However, every indication that I have ever had having to do with anybody taking a polygraph is the results are subject to interpretation, a subjective interpretation. And so what I mean by that is like you could have two polygraph examiners grade the results of one test very differently.
Absolutely, you could. It's, you know, and I know people don't understand this part. Most of what's being done in a polygraph examination is about simply giving enough theater that you feel sufficiently intimidated to being a truthful person. It's not really about whether this machine is examining your sociopath.
That's my opinion. I agree with that. I feel like, especially when they're like, you know, the machine says you're lying, you know, and then people confess or whatever. You know, there could be something to it. I think it's going to vary among not only examiners, but vary among the people actually taking the test, right?
Yeah.
And so, you know, there's a reason it's not allowed in court.
Right. Exactly.
And, you know, I do think that there was absolutely no reason for these kids not to be cooperative. It's a small town. They probably all knew Maddie. They were all probably devastated that she went missing. They were all probably very regretful of what had occurred as far as like, you know, so-and-so leaving because of a fight. And it probably didn't occur to, you know, 20-somethings that they were leaving her in peril, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, as far as they knew, they weren't. And so I'll say this. I have questions about like the timeline. Although I will say it's a pretty narrow timeline. just from the fact that like there were enough people verifying she was there around midnight and there was activity on her cell phone. I will say that the whole 3 to 8 thing, while I agree with it, I think it could be expanded backwards an hour or so, because I'll tell you what, man, if somebody asked me about my missing friend and like, why didn't I like ask them to leave with me? I'm going to say that I asked them to leave with me. And that's like going to be my guilty response.
Well, sure, even if you had nothing to do with it. I mean, you're going to feel like, well, yeah, I guess you're right. I shouldn't have left her there alone. And they're not at fault. They've all learned their lessons, I'm sure. That's a truly terrible thing. I think the timeline's pretty straightforward. The one question I would have is, I wonder, like, what was the territory of the cell phone tower that her phone had contact with? And because, well, a couple of things having to do with that make me question it. I don't feel like she was taken like at 8 o'clock.
No. She was, I think, up to the point that she's like texting with her mom. She's verifying that she's like in the tent. And then she has the phone call that comes in after that. So that puts it pretty close. Like I don't think there was a question of any of that stuff between 11 and 12. Like I think they basically could verify where she was based on her conversations with people.
Well, right. But okay, so her phone's never been found.
Correct. It's with her.
Okay, so if her phone, I mean, unless her phone could have pinged where she ended up, right?
I wondered about that.
A couple of things. Are we here yet? Are we to where we can talk about what may have happened?
We're almost there. Go
ahead.
Okay, so I was just going to say there's a ton of evidence collected. And I want to point that out because it's important. They collect everything that Maddie owned, basically. The only 2 items that she didn't have with me that weren't clothing items were her keys were gone and her phone was gone, which is the newer iPhone that she had just upgraded. So they take her truck, her tent, her sleeping bag, her pillow. They take Jordy's sleeping bag, pillow, clothing, pillowcases, even though Jordy had picked them up. Like, she had washed some of it. And they did find blood in Jordy's sleeping bag, but it was determined to be from a cut on her ankle. So she was questioned about this, and she was cleared because she had a cut from a school trip years earlier that would have accounted for the blood there, and it matched her.
I was going to say, if it wasn't her friend's blood, if it wasn't Maddie's blood, then it was kind of irrelevant. Yeah.
Yeah, for the most part. So the Scott family ends up hiring a private investigator. They do their own interview related to Jordy. There is something that they come up with where they wonder about Jordy. They never really come forward with what their questions are, and it doesn't seem to have gone anywhere.
Well, I feel like they sensed her like life-shattering guilt. That she left her friend and then her friend disappeared. And, that could go 2 ways. Well, would we both have disappeared? Or like, why did I do that?
Yeah.
Why did I do that? And so I think that would be the only, you would, no question, you'd pick up on that from her. No question.
I think so too. But the RTMP, the various spokespersons over the years, they have said that they have never identified someone who would want to cause Maddie harm, or to have any good reason to have caused her disappearance. According to them, in their investigation, they do believe that foul play is involved, but they reported that there was no sign of a struggle. I don't know how they would have done that with the lag in time. It's a small lag in time, but it's an important one when you've got 150 people coming in on Saturday night and they're kind of stepping all over what would have happened, 24 hours previously.
Yeah. I think that what I interpreted that to mean is like there was no blood anywhere. There was no sign that like a massive fight had taken place.
Yeah.
Because, you're right. Without that, it's really hard to tell, right?
Yeah.
But there are some aspects that, to me, indicate there probably wasn't a struggle. And that would be, like, the proximity of her vehicle to the tent.
Yep.
the very first thing you're going to do when things go wrong is you're going to get in your vehicle and leave, right?
Yeah.
And that didn't happen. And they didn't find her keys, which tells me she has her keys with her, right? Or at least she did at the point in time she exited the facility, because otherwise they would have been found, right?
Yeah, they would have been found in the process. I 100% agree with that. Even if they had been secreted on the truck or something, they would have been found.
Right. And if she couldn't drive away in her truck because she didn't have her keys, then they would have been found.
Yeah, that's what I'm agreeing with you.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so also her phone, it's never been found.
Well, it hasn't, and it actually they lose it around I think it's 8 or 9 that morning,
Which means she had the phone with her and it had battery.
Right.
Which is weird, right?
That's a little weird to me. Okay, the search effort. Let's talk about this for a second, and then we're going to come, because we're coming up on the theories, and I know that's where you want to go, and I agree with you. So the area around Hogsback Lake was searched extensively. This is the lakes, the creeks, the fields, the swamps, the forests, the campsites themselves, the surrounding properties. Hogsback Lake is about 128 acres in size. It goes down to about 22 feet at its deepest with 10 plus feet visibility. So it's almost clear. Like I have at the end of my street here, I have a lake that's about 100 acres, and it only has visibility to 5 feet. So you can't see like what's underneath that unless it happens to be like a tree or something poking up. The area has been searched by foot, by four-wheelers, on horseback, helicopters, drones, divers, cadaver dogs, boats, cars, trucks, and even brought in helicopters using, in the early days, they used FLIR. So they were using forward-looking infrared. There was a particularly extensive search effort like in the first few days of the disappearance. And they had the search crews walking basically hand in hand. They were using cadaver dogs. They had dive teams in the lake. So this was an early search, and it was a thorough search. They were using the infrared at night and in the early morning, because they were looking for times when the ground was cool and the body would like stand out against it if she was there. The helicopter search covered an area east to west between Isle Pierre and Fraser Lake, and north to south between Fort St. James and south of Sinka Mountain, which is like the Finger Lake and Paddock Lake areas. It covered a total of almost 3,000 square kilometers. And the boat search, they used sonar and side scanning sonar, which is unheard of in the early days of this type of rural investigation. And as far as like the next part of this, I'm just going to talk about the awareness effort. If you've heard about Maddie Scott, it's because her mother, they say her family, but it's her mother. Her mother was pushing, asking for all the help that they could find. At one point, the reward was $100,000 for anyone sharing information leading to the arrest. Every year, the family and friends were doing, which I just was telling you about, a yearly poker run to raise awareness. There have been countless television documentaries and podcasts about this case, and a documentary film that was produced called The Vanishing of Maddie Scott. This case has been highly, highly covered. Would you agree with all that?
Oh, definitely.
Okay, so let's jump into the theories. And
before or after?
What do you mean?
Well, there's theories about her missing, and then there's theories that would change slightly because she's been found.
Okay, either one is fine with me. Like, where do you want to start here? I can like run down the list of like the possibilities, and then we can attack those, or we can.
Whichever you want to do is fine. I can throw some things out there if you want.
So, in a very general sense, one of the first things that was out there for me was animal attack. There was no so we don't believe she ran away. She would have taken her truck and her things. It's probably not a purposeful disappearance. Can we agree on that? Like, she didn't do it. She didn't run away to be a new life or whatever.
Oh, absolutely not.
Okay. So even though there's a lack of nearby remains and a struggle, it has been brought up that in this area, you've got cougars and bears.
Yeah.
I'm going to leave that sitting there for now. Then there was the idea that she had some form of accident on her own where she fell into the lake. Clearly, that is no longer a thing that needs to be discussed. I don't think she's tied to the Highway of Tears in a meaningful way. So
I don't think so either.
So that sort of leaves us with, well, so do we think it's a suicide? Like she walked away to kill herself walking away?
No.
Okay, yeah, I'm going to agree with that. So there's really only accidental death, which could be an overdose, could be hit by a car, something like that. There is foul play, which could be by either friends or associates, acquaintances, or stranger. That's it. That's all we got, right?
Yeah, I mean, and to me, it gets substantially more limited after we know that her body was found.
Yeah, and so the RCMP from the beginning said they believed that there was some form of foul play involved in her disappearance, even though there was no sign of a struggle. It was only reported that like she was missing the clothes I described earlier, and she had 2 items with her. She had an iPhone 4, which would have been brand new at the time, and she had her keys, including her truck key, on what they call a Gothic style lanyard. I have no idea what that means. Do you know what?
She probably had it around her neck. I don't know what Gothic style is, but a lanyard is something. So that's why it was around her neck.
Okay. So I do have a quote in here from a guy named Rick Beatty, who was from the Vanderhoof Search and Rescue. The conclusion that the search and rescue people came to was they believed she must have left in a vehicle because there was no evidence to indicate she had left by foot. I don't know how accurate that is, but that's what I have.
I would agree with that. Especially we know now that she's been found, and it's about 18 kilometers or about 10 miles.
Yeah.
And so under the circumstances where she had her keys and her phone, a working phone, there would be absolutely no reason for her to walk 10 miles.
Yeah, I sort of agree with that. I mean, I could see all sorts of things happening where someone gets up in the night, gets disoriented. I can't see it being, 10, 11 miles. That's a lot.
Right. And that's the main reason I would say, like, she didn't succumb to the elements, right? She didn't go that far. If anything happened, anything that would warrant her with the necessity to do something, right? It would involve, at the very least, getting in her vehicle.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Because your vehicle is going to be substantially safer from any animal attack. It's going to be safer, from any sort of weather problem that occurred. And so I would say more than likely, I guess it's possible that if she had a friend there that showed up, that they went for a walk. But even that, I mean, she had so her phone either died or was shut off at 8 a.m.
Yeah.
Around, right?
Yeah.
And so I think whatever happened, it really does have to be with somebody she knows, or it had to have happened just so incredibly fast. Now, any sign of an overdose, I feel like there would have been some sort of, well, I guess so if she overdosed.
We're talking about like a body dump, right? Like her friends give her something, she overdoses and... Right,
and so in that case, though, I don't see why they wouldn't have just come forward about that.
I think they would have failed the interview portion of events.
And this was a big deal, and I would guess that anybody that had been at that park or at that lake in the past 12 years, they would have been on the lookout for the girl that was missing there, right? I mean, it's not like there's a whole lot of options. Just like with her skull being found, I mean, it could only be so many people's skull, right? this was a big deal that she
Yeah.
was missing, like
Yeah.
she was. And while it is part of the Highway of Tears, what's called the Highway of Tears stretches a long way, right? As far as the disappearances and the murders go.
Yeah. It does. It does. It stretches a long way, multiple provinces. This doesn't make sense there. The breakdown, if you pull up like the articles about this and the wiki about this, Dawn Scott mentions that there was a guy that she had been interested in who had showed up for the party.
Right, but he friend zoned her.
He friend zoned her. So we don't know what happened there, but the idea is, like, generally we think he's kind of not a suspect, but who knows?
Well, if so she liked him and he friend zoned her, like, he's not going to turn around and kill her. It'd be more likely she'd kill him.
I mean, that's an interesting idea. I don't think either of those things are likely. I think it's just
you just move on. But yeah, she might have been like a little disappointed or whatever, but she was 20 years old.
Yeah. So there was another guy at the party who had been interested in her that she had friend zoned.
Yeah, and so that could be something, right?
Well, that guy apparently, from all accounts, and even the wiki quotes it, this guy was put through the ringer, like...
Which is what I imagine. That's what I was going to say. So that could be something to look into, but I imagine they've done that.
Yeah, I actually imagine that when it comes down to it, even though it may not be public knowledge, those two guys probably got a lot of attention in a case like this from the cops.
There's no question.
Yeah.
Like, every single person that was even tangentially involved, it looks like was like a willing... contributor to trying to help figure out where she was, right?
Yeah. And as you said earlier, they point the finger pretty heavy at her friend Jordy, who was there. And she was supposed to be spending the night with Maddie, but that turned out to be an excuse for her to hang out with her new boyfriend, Tyler.
Well, and I will say this. Jordy more than likely had nothing to do with it. Because there's no motive there, right?
Yeah.
And if it was some sort of catfight situation, in the very rare instances where a girl would kill her friend, her best friend or whatever.
There's not a body disposal.
There's not a body disposal. No, they would have found her there. Right. And so it seems so odd to me that, pointing the finger at Jordy to me tells me how little they had to go off of.
That's exactly where I was headed with this. They even go so far. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead. It's fine.
I was just going to say they go so far as to bring this other guy, Fribjun Jornsen, in, and they like this is a guy that Jordy has interviewed on 48 Hours, and she says that Maddie and Fribjun had been hooking up and that he was bad news. Now this is a guy from like their softball team, like the the Vanderhoof local like rec league softball teams.
So did Jordy really talk about this?
Yeah, it gets brought up there, and I have not seen her say it. I remember like hearing it where it's like a throwaway sentence. So,
and I came to the conclusion on that particular subject. I was like, that's so convenient, right?
Well, he ends up getting murdered the following year.
I know that. And so I was like, I wonder if that really even ever happened.
When I look at the whole, I don't think there's anything going on between this guy.
It has nothing. I mean, even if there was, it had nothing to do with her disappearance.
In fact, I think the media has twisted something that probably sounded more like, and I'm making this part up. I'm just trying to give an example. Oh, well, she was in youth group with that guy who got murdered, and back when they were 12 they kissed. You know what I'm saying? It's like
something like that. Sure.
Yeah, it's something ridiculous like that. He was murdered in 2012,
and I do think this is the kind of place, and I don't know for certain, but I think this is the kind of place where, like, when somebody gets murdered, like, people notice. Like, it doesn't happen all the time, right?
Yeah. I agree with that.
And so I got to a certain point. I've never heard Jordy speak about it that I can recall. I've never heard anybody say it with any sort of like factual information, but it is a rumor. And then I was like, well, I would need to see where that started, because especially if it started after he was found murdered, Yeah.
To
To me, it's just like, oh, people are just, and I say that in sort of a dismissive way, but it's what people try to do to cope with these things, right?
Yeah.
They try to make it make sense. And when they can't, they'll start grasping at stuff. And, I don't know I don't know how factual any of that was, but I do think ultimately, even if all of it was completely factual, it is irrelevant.
Well, it's one of those things where when you have nothing, you start to see things that maybe aren't there.
Sure, yeah. Or you can make something that's almost there actually be there, right? I mean, it runs the gamut, and it's a normal thing that happens.
It is. And so it's been proposed that someone nearby or someone who was at the party that was unknown to Maddie may have potentially come across this party or saw this as an opportunity or hung back behind. The FBI kind of contradicts a lot of things when they get into talking about stranger abductions of women. They're mostly motivated by sexual assault, which we know, but then those types of abduction are most likely to involve the use of a firearm to guarantee the abduction is successful.
And there might have been one used.
Right. But typically being taken at gunpoint, you don't take your keys and your phone.
Right, exactly. I do think after you said the lanyard thing, which I had read, but I didn't process it, it's possible she had her phone in her pocket, and if her keys were on a lanyard, then they were around her neck. Yeah. And so, it might not have been a matter of grabbing them.
They may have already been on her person, yeah.
Right. Which is something, I mean, I wouldn't put it past myself to do something like that.
I clip my keys when I'm camping, I clip my keys to my belt with a carabiner. I lose my keys.
Well, I mean, when you're out like that, right? I mean, it's one thing if you lose your keys in your house, right? I mean, you're going to find them eventually.
Right. But when I'm out, I have to clip them because I will lose them.
But if you are out in the woods, and so, yeah, it makes a lot of sense, right? That
Do you think there was an accident of any kind and people didn't talk?
I think that is unlikely.
Same here. I just wanted to make sure. Okay, I'm just going to say something, and this is going to sound so weird. The whole tent thing, and this is one of those things that people are going to shoot me down, but this is why Keys doesn't come off of this for me. I can't get him there. I cannot make it make sense for Israel Keys to be there. But I will just say this. 5 weeks before this happened, all right? Do you know what happened?
Not right off the top of my head now.
Holly Bobo goes missing on April 13th, 2011. And I picture the way he talked to, like, whoever took her. And I still don't think that I know people hate when this happens. I do not believe that the people involved in Holly Bobo's case had any idea what was going on with Holly Bobo's case. I don't believe Jason Autry. I don't believe Zach Adams. I don't believe Dylan Adams. It could be I don't believe them, and they did it anyways. In my mind, I have never been able to get the similarities between Holly Bobo and Samantha Koenig's abductions out of my head. And
that kneeling thing.
It's that kneeling thing. And if you were going to tell someone to get the fuck out of the tent, you would kneel, open the zipper, and tell them to get out. I don't know what fishing at Hogsback Lake is like. It's crazy for him to have been there. But
would you like to not have thoughts that Keys did this?
Go ahead.
He would have taken the tent.
Well, okay. You say that.
It was a very nice tent.
It was a nice tent, and there was nice shit there. And that's how the FBI. That is the only thing the FBI says doesn't seem.
He would have taken all of that stuff, right?
Unless someone was thought to be nearby and he was moving along. If he took Holly Bobo, he didn't take any stuff from her.
Well, I mean, we're talking about two different things here. All I said was, if you would like to know that it wasn't Keys, I can give you something to go off of. And that would be, well, for one thing, he would have done something weird with her truck, right? And he would have taken, okay, let's say not her tent. He would have taken like whatever nice stuff she had. Cause they did say like part of Maddie's thing was that when she got stuff, she didn't have a lot, but when she got stuff, she got like the best of whatever it was. And then she took care of her stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, I don't believe that she is Israel Keys' victim, but I'm telling you, I have never been able, like if I bend the timeline on the courier's disappearance, right? And I just drive him through the country, he passes by as this happens. And he arrives, like it's literally, if you drive him from there to the next two places, it's literally the distance between them for him to then make it in time to pick up the rental car. It's wild.
Yeah, I did the same thing and I didn't feel like the timing would work.
If I was a guy who bought like plane tickets and refunded them the way I think he might have, I don't
That's
know.
something they could find the information on that. Plus, it would show if you got a refund on your. For one thing, I know Keys wasn't buying tickets just to like throw the money out the window, and so the refund would show up as well.
Yeah, it should.
And so keep that in mind. But also, like, there's a well. I don't know. We don't have the information, but the FBI could see like who canceled their flights.
I looked at that at one point, and you're right to a
It's
point.
It's a terrorist type characteristic.
I understand what you're saying. I don't 100% agree that we would know.
Do you agree that the refund would show up on the statement?
On the statement itself, absolutely. But would the FBI release that information? I don't necessarily believe that would happen.
Okay.
And
what?
I don't think that
The
FBI would know that,
Yeah.
but the FBI would never tell you in a way that you knew on a dead serial killer ever. Like you would have to literally work for the FBI to see that information.
If it showed back up on the statement?
Yeah. To have his credit card statements, you would have to work for the FBI.
Well, they put most of they didn't say that it was.
No, they cherry picked his credit card statements to see what the timeline looks like. They made that timeline up. That's not a credit card statement. It's a timeline made up of travel arrangements. They're not telling you refunds. They might not even know that it's like sitting there. That's what I'm saying. Like
But the timeline was put out specifically to aid the investigation. And so if they had information that indicated that he didn't take that flight for some reason, then that would be noted. It seems like.
Maybe. But my only thing there is that is the only way the Keys could be involved. And I can't. So we have
means he's not involved. So.
Well, we have these 4 missing girls that take place in this like one time period, and then at the end of it, you have Samantha Koenig. So you've got Madison Scott, Lauren Spear, you've got Holly Bobo.
She was first, right?
Holly Bobo would have been the first one in that group, yeah. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't really happen anywhere else, and like I'm not even saying necessarily at this point Keys. I'm just saying like. There is something interesting when like those type of abductions happen like that close to each other. And I am
time-wise.
Yeah. Just time-wise, just because this is all basically in 2011 in these remote locations over the period of about 6 months, you have these 4 cases. That's all I'm like referencing there. But at the end of it all, one of the reasons that like I connected it all in my head in the first place was because I made mistakes related to the white truck. Because I was thinking the white truck was Lauren Spear and it said Maddie Scott. It's like I had all these weird things going on there. And those like aren't accurate things. It's because I was staring at it too long. Like just wanting it to be something and sort of willing it to be a thing. Whether it's Keys or not, I really just wanted these cases to be solved.
I agree, and I do think I know that I would love to make it work, and that's exactly why I go down the path that it doesn't work until
That's how I am too.
Right.
But I will say this: I'm sure there will be more information that'll eventually be released, particularly if they lay charges. And I've seen all kinds of stuff online. They're speculating it's these brothers that live near that property. They speculated about the property owner. They speculated that it's someone who has recently gone to prison and then like giving up other. Have you seen all this?
I've seen not all. I will say that the property owners would not have been allowing people to pick up fill dirt on their land if they had any knowledge of it.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
And so more than likely, I doubt they're involved. And you know, so you've got to get her from being asleep or awake or whatever in the tent and not getting in her vehicle, right?
Yeah.
With no signs of a struggle.
Yep.
And then that would be somebody putting her in a different vehicle, right?
It's so weird, isn't it?
And putting her in a different vehicle, no signs of a struggle. And, who knows what happened after that. But, I don't feel like they ever expanded the search as far as she ended up being away from where she started, from what it looks like, right? They were looking around that lake area, and she was in a slightly kind of northwestern direction.
Yeah.
And so now these properties are huge as well. Yeah. From what I can sort of tell, I can't really completely tell, but it looks like, for the most part, you're talking about 100 plus acres, right?
Are you talking about the property? Yeah, so it's 165 acres. It appears to be.
Right, and so I don't think that the owners of the land would. I feel like they wouldn't have let people just be getting dirt if that was an issue.
No, I tend to agree with you there.
But it's probably going to be somebody that has some sort of connection. Unfortunately, so okay, let's say that from all accounts of what's been reported, they thoroughly investigated this case, and nobody that seemed to be in the proximity of the situation had anything to do with it from what their initial investigative results yielded, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so in order for this to be some sort of stranger abduction, okay, you've got to have a stranger in the middle of the night, between after 3, before 8, come upon this one girl in her tent.
Yeah.
Okay. And I feel like the odds of that occurring are very, very low.
Yeah, I mean, so I will say this. It's actually, okay, if you take that and you go, okay, odds on statistics, it's actually more likely that Maddie got spooked in her tent and walked thinking she was going to walk back into town when she couldn't find her keys. Took her phone with her, not realizing.
Except that if she couldn't find her keys, they have to be somewhere.
I'm just saying it's more likely that happened than a stranger abduction happened.
Well, I would say, okay, well, in that case, then I would say that it's impossible that she left that place walking.
I won't rule anything out at this point. I'm hoping that we're going to get some answers here.
Well,
I agree with you. I just think that if we're talking like the possibility that someone at the party she didn't know that knew her friends did something, and it's like one of these rumors that have been talked about for years and years and years, it happens to have some elements of truth to it, then yes, I'm with you. Like that could be.
That's not technically a stranger.
Well,
no.
Right.
Because they crossed paths at the party.
Right. But I'm saying, unless we're talking about that situation as a stranger abduction, if we're talking about like Israel Keys or like, the boogeyman coming out of the bushes and taking her, I would say it's more likely that she walked to that location between the hours of 3 and 8. Because that's about exactly the amount of time it would take her to walk.
Why would she walk though?
I don't know why. I'm just saying.
Well, I feel like it's pretty safe to say she would have been walking in a circle around the tent trying to find her keys before she would have went through the woods.
That before Ted Bundy rose from the grave and popped up in her tent, I believe she walked away from there for some reason And I do not believe the RCMP would have noticed if she had done that unless she had been running away from there. I think that's what they're describing. They're saying she didn't run away in a panic.
Well, of course not, because she would have just gotten in her truck.
Unless she couldn't find the keys.
Okay, but if she couldn't find her keys, they would have been found.
Maybe.
Why wouldn't they have been found?
I realized something interesting about this. There's an outhouse 50 feet from her tent in the pictures.
Well, that was the other thing about, and so
that's how it got.
If she had to go to the bathroom, like she didn't have to go far, right?
Right.
That's how I looked at that. There's no way that she ended up where her, at least skull was found, on her own accord. She didn't walk there. It doesn't even make sense that she would have been walking in that direction, or
it's back towards her house from where she was to her
which
home.
She could get back to so much faster if she called her sister to come and bring her extra set of keys.
I am not arguing with you at all. I am just somehow we now know that Maddie Scott was in a tent and somehow ended up about 9 miles away from that tent, dead.
It's 18 kilometers. That'd be a little over 10 miles.
Yeah, I'm just I'm just saying that's a long distance.
She didn't walk there herself, and if she had to walk because she had lost her keys, that would mean her keys would have been somewhere in the vicinity.
What if someone walked off with her keys?
Somebody would have said, "Hey, I had her keys."
What if they still have her keys to this day and don't realize it?
Then they're idiots.
Oh, there's no question. That is an accurate statement about some of the people that were at this party.
It sounds like she had a very noteworthy lanyard keychain.
I don't know. All the descriptions in the early newspaper articles say it was a Gothic keychain.
Which means somebody noticed her keychain. I couldn't tell you what anybody's keychain looked like.
I couldn't tell you if you showed me a picture of a Gothic keychain if someone had a Gothic keychain. I don't even know what that is related to. That's what I mean. Like it's very confusing to me, and I think that that is still possible that her keys ended up in the trash and got thrown away, or her keys were on someplace they weren't supposed to be and they just disappeared. I'm saying I still believe it's possible.
She has the worst luck on earth, then.
Well, she died, so yes, she does actually.
Right, and so what are the odds that her keys end up in a weird place?
I don't know.
And she dies.
I don't know. I have a feeling.
And then, of course, her phone.
So I have a feeling this will be one of those cases where it's going to take us a while to find out what happened to her. But I'm hoping to know, how all of this comes together on the anniversary, the 12th anniversary, basically. And I know she was found a few days earlier, but still.
It is. I mean, it's telling and it's eerie. I am glad she's found. I do feel like it's just so unfortunate. Everything, it was just like a star-crossed night as far as that was concerned. And, all those kids, I mean, she suffered the most because she died, right? And she's been missing all this time. But, I mean, can you imagine your party ending up like that? It's the worst
weird
possible set of circumstances. But at the same time, I don't feel like it's going to be a stranger abduction. Acquaintance maybe. I don't think anybody knows who did it. And so, I'm sure law enforcement has thought of this, but anybody that wasn't at the second party, that it seemed weird that they weren't at the second party. That was at the first party, right? Because they maybe wouldn't. This is going to be a situation where probably things I mean, to the extent you can do it without leaving signs of a struggle, things got out of hand, right? The fact that nobody else in that area that I'm aware of has suffered a similar fate, right? Except, I mean, I know the highway of tears is a thing, but like we discussed earlier, this was a lot different, right?
Yeah, it's different.
And so this is not a common thing that's occurred, right?
Not that we know of. We don't. I don't have a good way to search this area. Not just because it's Canada, because it is notoriously difficult to look through areas of Canada and see missing persons and unsolved murders, but because this area itself is so rural, the distance between these two places has very few houses.
Well, right, which is exactly why I don't think she was walking. I'm just saying.
I don't know. I mean, I'm hoping we find out more in the coming days. But okay, so back to my very first point in all of this. Did you ever think this was going to be solved?
Yeah, I think everything's going to be solved eventually.
I didn't think that this case would be solved in our lifetime.
Yeah, well, somebody was alert enough to notice. And it was interesting. They got a search warrant, right? After the report came that...
Yeah, I think that was because of the surprise associated with what had happened.
They just wanted to make sure that everything was on the up and up in their part of it, right?
Precisely. Anything that they were doing there, they wanted to make sure that anything they collected was not fruit of the poisonous tree or whatever it would be in their area.
Right. And I thought that was interesting because obviously that's not an exigent circumstance if it's a skull, right?
Right. It's been there a while.
I hope that, I don't know. So finding her is huge, but under the circumstances, I don't know. I was like, I hope they find DNA evidence, right?
No. I don't think it's possible, is it?
I doubt it.
In a compost pile?
No, I doubt it. But I was thinking to I mean, it depends. Like if her clothes were put somewhere and they have DNA on them, I mean, I don't know. I doubt it. I doubt they're going to find
Well,
DNA.
I mean, look, I could see, what if this property turns out to be where they dump excess soil from around the lake? What if this is what if they're clearly selling topsoil and compost from this area? What if they're also clearly buying it and they went?
If they bought soil from the lake, then I'd go back to.
Do you see what I mean? There's all sorts of odd.
Yeah, but there's okay, so I would say, well, maybe she died of exposure, except why would she have died of exposure with a working phone and a vehicle?
I'm not saying, okay, look, you can die from exposure when you walk to the water, fall, and hit your head, and you just happen to be out of sight.
Yeah, but they would have found her.
In theory, yes.
And to me, if it just, okay, fine, you can die of exposure, but you don't hide your body that well, right?
No. I'm just saying.
You're right. It could be something tangential. It could be not even from the lake. It could be a completely different dump site.
This could be dirt that came from, someplace between there and the lake too. I'm just there's so many questions that pop up because of this. It's fascinating.
I mean, sure, yeah, because it's, now they've found her. They know for certain that she's dead. I don't really think it's ever been much of a question because it wasn't like she still lived at home. She was fairly young and she had a job and everything. And so it wasn't she would have had to have gone back to her life, right?
Yeah.
And so I don't think that it was really, maybe she's alive somewhere. I guess maybe held in captivity or something, but that doesn't really happen that much. And I don't know. I don't know. I'm sure that I would hate to be the people that live on that road right now.
Jeez.
Can only imagine. And this is a very rural part of Canada, right?
Yeah. Yeah. This area is it's mainly farmland out here and trees.
Yeah. And this soil farm, I don't know what it is, but what I've heard is somebody was getting soil. That's how they found her, right? They were
Right.
loading up on soil.
Right.
Well, hopefully they're going to update this, but
I hope so too.
it may be a while.
I'll tell you what. I'm thinking of Dawn Scott and Eldon Scott, but I hope that they are able to cope with this a little better, knowing that Maddie's gone. Like you said, I think we all knew, but now they've confirmed it. It's kind of a big deal. I don't have anything else on this right now. What about you?
Yep, that's good.
Thank you so much for joining us today. We'll see you next time. This is True Crime XS.
I won't leave your side for anything. What would be the point? I'm with you through and through. What I was looking for was everything, and everything I found, well, honey, I found it on you. You're the song I wanna sing. You're the story I wanna tell. You're the reason I believe that, honey, love is a ringing bell. Nothing could shake me, but then you shook me. You turned me right side up from being wrong side down. I couldn't be taken, but then you took me. You gave me words to write. You went and changed my sound. Now you're the song I wanna sing. You're the story I wanna tell. You're the reason I believe that, honey, love is a ringing bell. For 4 years I couldn't tell, but you saw the man inside the shell. So you're the song I wanna sing. You're the story I wanna tell. You're the reason I believe that, honey, love is a ringing bell. You're the song I wanna sing. You're the story I wanna tell. You're the